Good afternoon, everybody. Today's our topic is citizenship. Citizenship is a relationship between an individual and state. It is seen in the context of complementary rights and responsibilities. According to T.H. Marshall, citizenship is full and equal membership in a political community. It is a full and equal membership in a political community. The earliest form of citizenship were limited and exclusionary in nature, as well as those who had property were given the citizenship right. Women and slaves were excluded from these rights. It was with the advance of the modern liberal state that the demands for equality gained momentum and for the socio-economic inclusion of the marginalized section, the citizenship rights were extended to them. For a democracy to improve itself, the citizens should take active part in governance, which ensures accountability. Passive citizenship can lead to stagnation in any democracy and could further alienate the representatives from the people. A number of factors like state blockages against welfare policies, increasing defense budget, increased digital surveillance by the state, marginalization of the weaker sections, environmental concerns, and multicultural pressures in the West due to globalization have regained the debate around the concept of citizenship. Concept of citizenship. What is the concept of citizenship? Citizenship is the status of a person recognized under the custom or law as being a legal member of a sovereign state or part of a nation. A person may have multiple citizenship, and a person who does not have citizenship of any state is said to be stateless. The term citizen can be understood in a narrow or in a broad sense. In a narrow sense, it means the resident of a city or one who enjoys the privileges of living in a city. While in a broad sense, citizen means a person who resides within the territorial limits of the state. In modern era, the concept of full citizenship encompasses not only active political rights but full civil and social rights. Historically, the most significant differences between national and a citizen is that citizen has the right to vote for elected officials and to be elected. This distinction between full citizenship and other lesser relationship goes back to antiquity. Until the 19th and 20th century, it was typical for only a small percentage of the people who belong to a city or state to be full citizens. In the past, most people were excluded from citizenship on the basis of gender, class, ethnicity, religion, or other factors. There are three types of the rights associated with citizenship: civil rights, political rights, and social rights. The civil rights are related to individual freedom like liberty, freedom of speech and expression, etc. These rights can be seen as power against the state as they safeguard the dissent in a democracy. The political dimension includes political rights through which an individual takes part in political life of his country, like right to vote, right to form or join in any political party, etc. These rights are associated with parliamentary institutions in a democracy. The social dimension refers to the right to share in the social and cultural heritage of country, a determining factor of a citizenship. Each country has its own policies, rules, regulations, and criteria as who is entitled to its citizenship. A person can be recognized or granted citizenship on a number of grounds. Usually, citizenship based on place of birth is automatic. In other case, an application may be required. One is citizenship on the basis of place of birth, the birth, or other is it may be acquired from other country. Citizens are of two types: natural born and naturalized. Natural born citizens are those who are the citizen of a state by virtue of their birth or blood relations. Naturalized citizens are those foreigners. Naturalized citizens are those foreigners. They are the foreigners who are granted the citizenship of a country on the fulfillment of some condition laid down by the respective country. They have to fulfill certain condition from whom the country they take the rights of the citizenship. The person who desires to be a citizen of a foreign country has to give up citizenship of his native country. Any person can acquire the citizenship of a foreign country after having fulfilled the condition laid down by the country for this purpose. The first factor, citizenship by birth. If one or both of a person's parents are citizens of a given state, then the person may have the right to be a citizen of that state as well. States normally limits the right to citizenship by descent to a certain number of generations born outside the state. This form of citizenship is not common in civil law countries. Second factor, born within a country. Born within a country. Some people are automatically citizens of the state in which they are born. Some people are automatically citizens of the concerned state in which they are born. This form of citizenship originated in England, where those who were born within the realm were subject of the monarch, and is common in common law countries. Then, third factor, citizenship by marriage. Many countries fast track naturalization process based on the marriage of a person to a citizen. Countries which are destinations for such imagination often have regulation to try to detect forced marriage, where a citizen marries a non-citizen typically for payment, without them having the intention of living together. Then, naturalization. States normally grant citizenship to people who have entered the country legally and been granted permit to stay or been granted political asylum (ASRA) and also live there for a specified period. Then evaluation of the concept of citizenship, page number 103. How the concept of citizenship is evolved. The concept of citizenship goes back to the ancient Greek city-state, where population was divided into two classes, the citizens and the slaves. The citizens enjoyed both civil and political rights. They directly or indirectly participated all the functions of the civil and political lives of the state, whereas slaves enjoyed none of such rights. Slaves are deprived to enjoy the rights, and they suffered from all kinds of the political and economic disabilities. Even women were not given citizenship rights, which were reserved only for free nation-born men. In this way, in ancient Greeks, the term citizen was used in a narrow sense. Only those who enjoyed civil and political rights and who participated in the functions of the civil and political life of the people were regarded as citizens. With similar processes followed in ancient Rome, where people belonging to only rich class, known as patricians, were privileged to enjoy the civil and political rights of the country. Only the patricians participated in the functions of the civil and political life of the state. Only the patricians. They were participated in the functions of the civil and political lives of the state, and the rest of the population was not privileged to enjoy any such rights. The citizens were required to develop qualities of civics virtue, that is a term derived from Latin word virtus, which means manliness, in the sense of performing military duty, patriotism, and devotion to duty and law. In the medieval times, citizenship was associated with protection by state, as the absolute state wanted to impose their authority over their diverse populations. It was in tradition with social contract theories like Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, who believed that it is the main aim of the sovereign to protect individual life and property. It was a passive understanding of citizenship as individual developed on the state for security. This notion was challenged by France Revolution, which was occurred in the year 1789, and the Declaration of the Rights of the Man and Citizen. The citizen was described as a free and autonomous individual. The modern notion of citizenship seeks to strike a balance between equality, freedom and equality. Inequalities like caste, class, gender, etc. are being limited, are being eliminated by providing condition of equality through affirmative action. Affirmative action means giving special status to some underprivileged sections of society to develop their potentialities, to develop their standard of living. Then we will discuss about different theories of citizenship. First, liberal theory. According to this theory, civil rights constitute the foundations of citizenship, and it revolves around the notion of individualism. Citizenship is a legal status which confers certain rights on the individual, protecting him from state interferences. T.H. Marshall, in his book Citizenship and Social Class, published in the year 1950, has traced development of citizenship in Britain. He has divided citizenship in three elements: civil, political, and social. Right necessary from freedom, rights necessary for freedom come under civil. Political covers the rights to take part in politics, while social rights cover the rights to economic welfare and security. Marshall believed that social rights are the basics of civil and political rights. Their development has been different times frames. Civil from the 18th century, political from the 19th, and social rights that was developed in 20th century. He argued that civil rights given equal moral worth to individual, but they will be meaningless if not supported by social rights, which stand for equal social worth. For example, right to freedom of speech has little value if one has nothing reasonable to say due to lack of education. Citizenship stands for equality, while capitalism breeds class inequalities. That is why Marshall entrusted the state with welfare function to take care of the needy ones by ensuring minimum standard of living, that is social security. Like the true liberal tradition, Marshall did not try to eliminate inequality, but he sought to reduce this inequality. John Rawls, who made a contribution to liberal theory of citizenship by arguing for redistribution of the goods and services to benefit the less advantaged sections of the society, the least advantaged sections of the society. In practice, however, substantive equality still eludes liberal citizenship, although it guarantees formal legal equality irrespective of differences in terms of caste, race, gender, etc. The next theory, Republican theory. Republican theory. The Republican tradition focuses on civic self-rule through participation of citizens. Rousseau argues in Social Contract that co-authoring of the laws through general will make citizens free and law legitimate. That is why active participation in the deliberation and policy making is advocated by Republicans, as it ensures individuals are not subject but they are citizens. Unlike liberals who see citizenship as being protected by law, Republicans want participation in formulations of the law. Republicans want the citizens to participate in the law-making process. Liberals want a representative democracy, while the Republican promotes deliberative democracy. Republicans further argue that citizenship should be seen as common civic identity shaped by common public culture. As civic identity, citizenship can unite citizens as long as this identity is stronger than their other identities like religion, ethnicity, etc. Republicans criticized communitarians as well as they are apprehensive of local identities being placed above the civics goal. However, given the scale and complexity of modern nation state, ensuring citizen participation is a top task. Then next theory, libertarian theory. Libertarian citizenship can be traced to British conservative government under Margaret Thatcher in 1979 to give more importance to market rights over social rights. More importance is given to market rights in comparison to social rights. It was believed that social rights, that is welfare rights, were becoming unaffordable for the state. They argue that people seek to pursue their values and preferences through private activity rather than public redistribution. Libertarians say citizenship is the product of free choice. They argue that citizenship is the product of free choice and contract among individuals. It considers market society as its basic and a suitable model of civic life. Robert Nozick is the chief exponent of this theory. He observes that individuals resort to private activity, market exchange, and association to realize their values, beliefs, and preferences. Then, next theory, communitarian theory. Communitarians argued that individual does not exist prior to the community. Individual does not exist prior to community. They criticized the liberals for ignoring the social natures of individual by focusing too much on individual. Further, communitarians also argue that individuals have not given any importance to duties and responsibilities toward community as their focus is on rights of an individual. Skinner said that individual liberty is maximized through public service and priority of the common goods over pursuits of the individual interest. Here, citizen is conceived as someone who plays an active role in shaping the future directions of society through political debate and decision making. The main tenet of this theory is that a citizen should identify himself with the community. The citizen has to identify himself with the community of which he is a member and take part in the political life and contribute to the realization of the civic virtue, which include respect for others and importance of public service. Hence, unlike the liberals who focus on individual, communitarian citizenship give more importance to group rights. However, Critics argue that this model would be suitable only to a small homogeneous society with common tradition. Then our next theory is Marxist theory. According to Marxist theory, rights associated with citizenship are a byproduct of class conflict. Existence of economically weaker section is a challenge for ensuring equality before law. The weaker sections of the society always try for equality because it is a challenge for ensuring them equality before law. These sections are not in a position to exercise their citizenship rights due to dominance of economically powerful sections of the society. They are the rich sections or capitalist sections of the society. Marxists believe that since the state will wither away after revolution, the concept of citizenship itself is temporary. Since there are no political institutions in a communist state, there will be no need for citizenship. However, in practice, there have been differences. Lenin abolished the term state and citizens from the Soviet constitution, but Stalin resorted them in 1936. The 1936. This constitution listed a number of the rights and duties for the individual. Anthony Giddens argues that the development of the modern democracy and citizenship began in the 16th century when the state started to increase its administrative power to supervise the population and store data regarding them. Then our next theory is pluralistic theory. Pluralistic theory. This pluralistic theory, it insists on inquiring into all types of discrimination, inquiring into all types of discrimination against people, whether on grounds of gender, race, religion, property, education, occupation, or age. In the contemporary world, so many social movements have been launched against different types of social discriminations. These include feminist movement, black movement, religious reform movement, workers movement, child rights movement, Dalit movement, Adivasi movement, and ecological movement, and others. Pluralistic theory, it recommends that the problem of citizenship should be analyzed in the context of all these movements. Then feminist perspective. Feminist perspective. Feminists have argued that women are second-class citizens of the world. Due to dominance of men in civil, political, cultural, economic, and social sphere of life, it is evident from the general trend in which women have less level of political participation in any country, while they also have less political representation compared to men. They have also questioned the distinction between public or political participation and the private or domestic sphere, which is a tool to perpetuate male dominance at the cost of the woman's right. That is why in the year 1970s, the main slogans of the women movement was, "The personal is political." Jess Mill has famously said, "An egalitarian family is a much more fertile ground for equal citizens than one organized like a school for despotism." To bring out equality between men and women, liberals believe that there should be constitutional reforms by which men will contribute to the household work. This is called civics feminism. This is called civics feminism. Socialist feminists want expansion in areas like free birth control, abortion, health facilities for women, and state recognition of domestic labor. Radical feminists want women's entry into public sphere for making them active citizens. The next view, Gandhian's views of citizenship. Gandhi's view on citizenship focused on ideas of common good and active citizenship. According to Gandhi, all states have coercive power often used to oppress citizens. All states have coercive power often used to oppress citizens. That is why he believed that a state should not have centralized power. Dharma, that is the moral law and duty. Ahimsa, that is non-violence in thought and deed. And Satya, truth and sincerity, were three central pillars of Gandhi's conception of citizenship. Dharma, Ahimsa, Satya were three central pillars of Gandhi's conception of citizenship. He further did not trust the state due to its coercive power and entrusted the individual to wrest the state coercion. He believed that the state represented compulsions, infirmity, and violence in a concentrated form, which is why this ideal was a non-violent state that would be self-governing and self-sufficient, in which the majority rule would prevail with due respect for minority right. Much more importance should also be given to the rights of minority sections of society. At the same time, Gandhi's belief that freedom is indivisible. One cannot be free if others are enslaved. That is why he pointed towards the concept of citizens of the world, where entire world is the canvas for an individual's activities. This is the implicit form in his words: think locally and act globally. One should open oneself to ideas from around the world, accepting that every struggle in the world is his or her own struggle. Then, next concept, the idea of global citizenship, page number 108, the idea of global citizenship. The supporters of the idea of global citizenship believe that all people have certain rights and responsibilities by virtue of being a citizen of this world. Under globalization, the territoriality limited idea of citizenship is being challenged by activities like migration, transnational economics, social and cultural exchange. According to Hannah Arendt, global citizenship means an ethic of care for the world. An ethic of care for the world. According to Oxfam, an international non-governmental organization, a global citizen is someone who is aware of and understands the wider world and their place in it. They take an active role in their community and work with the others to make our planet more equal, fair, and sustainable. Immanuel Kant's conception of world citizenship give importance to personal responsibilities for conduct which may have damaging consequences for their environment, and they defend compensation for peoples elsewhere. They emphasize the virtue of actions which benefit the wider community, and they concede that international society provides limited opportunities for participation in joint rule, as the idea of world government still remains exclusive. The idea of global citizenship can be criticized as it is largely focused upon duties towards others and on loyalties to communities which are wider than nation state rather than on active citizens. Traditional approaches argues that appeals to cosmopolitan citizenship amount to little more than an exercise in moral expression, while the nation state is a dominant from political community. However, the idea of global citizenship cannot be totally whisked away in times of the non-traditional security threats like climate change, food, water, energy security, terrorism, etc. To tackle such threats, nation states must cooperate with each other. To tackle such type of the threats, nation states have to cooperate with each other, and in the overall framework of this cooperation, every individual has a role to play in dealing with this issue. It is the duty of almost all the individuals to fight against this type of the global problem. This is a similar to the global citizenship where people think of a better future even for others who are not part of their country. That is to make the world a better place to live for all. Our next topic is civil society and state. Civil society and state. The idea of state occupies the important and central place in political science, as Professor Garner stated. Political science begins and ends with state. This concept of state and what it entails have changed and evolved over time. The focus has shifted from authority of the state to the duty of the people. Similarly, civil society has emerged as one of the most debated concepts in political theory. It is undeniable that the concept of civil society is linked to the modern state. It is a most important part of a modern state. The relation between the state and civil society has given rise to a number of questions like what is the concept of state and civil society? What is the nature of their relationship? These issues have been dealt with the succeeding sections in the following discussions. Now we will discuss about the different theories of state. The concept of state occupies the core of political theory. The concept of state occupies the core of political theory. State has been defined and redefined over centuries as some sort of political organization that has existed since ancient times. The notion of state begins with Plato and Aristotle through their definition of polis. For both of them, for both Plato and Aristotle, state was a natural, necessary, and it is an ethical institution. The state or police was there to enable a higher level of moral and good life. The contemporary definition owes its origin to Niccolo Machiavelli, who defined state as the power that has authority over men. From this definition followed that is known as the most acceptable explanation stated by Max Weber. Weber defined state as a human community that claims monopoly of the legitimate use of physical force within a given territory. Classic understanding of state. Plato, the Greek political thinker, throughout his work, makes a case for an ideal state. For him, an ideal state ruled by the philosopher rulers was nothing short of a divine institution worthy of emulation and imitations. He described his ideal state as one based on timeless and unchanging principle, suggesting that an ideal state existed which could be discerned and employed to reform of a diseased polity and transform it into a thing of beauty. During the time of the Plato, there was ignorance. The rule of the ignorance was prevalent at that time. Therefore, Plato thinks that this rule of the ignorance should be eliminated from the society. That's why he preferred the rule of the philosopher, the rule of the wise people to overcome the ignorance. Plato believed that the ideal state comprises members of three distinct classes. They are the ruler class, soldier class, and the people, they are the common people. Therefore, the ideal state possessed four virtues, that is the wisdom, courage, and discipline and justice. It would have wisdom because the rulers were the persons of the knowledge, the courage because its warriors were brave, self-discipline because the harmony that felt the societal matrix due to the common arrangement as to who ought to rule, and justice of doing one's job for which one was naturally fitted without interfering with other people. All the virtues, all the qualities, the persons who have predominant quality of the region, that persons is known as the ruling class. The person who have the predominant quality of the spirit, that persons are warrior classes or military classes, and the person who have predominant quality of the attitude, they are the trader classes, they are the common people. If all these type of the all the three types of the classes, they have to perform their own function without interfering the functions of the other classes, then true condition of the justice will be prevailed in the state, and that is the ideal state of Plato's. And here there is functional specialization and non-interferences. Each class have to perform their own duties. They should not interfere the functions of the other classes. There is no mobility of one function to the others. Plato emphasized that a good political community was one that promoted general well-being of all its citizens. An important feature of the society was the strong sense of community that its members shared. No one was favored at the expense of others. All were granted fair share in the benefit. The philosopher ruler was the right kind of ruler, for he was least concerned in capturing power or making money. Another Greek political philosopher, Aristotle, who is considered as the father of the political science, he defined state as a community. The state must exist for an end, and the end of the state is the highest good of man. Aristotle defined three stages of the development of the state. First, there are two basic instincts which were instrumental in bringing people together. The reproductive instinct that lets men and women to unite, and the other is self-preservation. Out of these, first thing to raise is the family. Family is the association established by nature for the supply of men's everyday wants. The family is the first stage of formation of state. Second stage was when several families are united and associations aim at more than supply of the daily needs. Thus is formed a village, in which in its most natural form is the union of family of common descent. The third stage is when several villages are united in a single complete community, large enough to be nearly self-sufficiency, the state comes into existence, originating in the bare needs of the life and continuing in existence for the sake of good life. For Aristotle, state is a natural society. Man's state is a natural society. Man's natural end is good life. The natural ends of man is good life, which is to be found only in the state. Therefore, the state is a natural society. Man is by nature a political animal, and he who by nature and not by a mere accident is without a state is either a bad man or above humanity. The person who will live outside the society is either God or beast. For Aristotle, state was the highest form of political union, for it represented the panel of the social evolution. The state was prior to the individual. The state was prior to the individual in the sense that it provided opportunities for the achievement of full humanity. Social affiliations gave to individuals their specific identity. For both Plato and Aristotle, the state and its law were more than a product of convention. It was a natural institution reflecting individual needs and purposes given human gregariousness and sociability. For both of them, police was a complete form of reality. Then, second, liberal individualistic understanding of the state. Liberal individualistic understanding of state. The theory of state from medieval times has been dominated by the dictum of the Roman Church. After the fall of the Roman Empire in 5th century, there was no single powerful secular government in West. There was, however, a central ecclesiastical power in Rome. The Catholic Church, that is the Catholic Church. In his power from the church rose to become the dominant power in West. Visually, the social life became a religious life governed by laws of the church. With ushering of the modern Western Europe in the 15th century, the idea of state became important again. Many new definitions were propounded by various scholars. One of the important theorists was Niccolo Machiavelli. So far as political thinkers from Plato, Aristotle to the medieval ages had concerned themselves with the central question of the ends of the state and had considered state power as a means to a higher and concepts in moral terms. But Machiavelli adopted a quite different line. To him, the power of the state is the end of the state. The power of the state is the end of the state. That is, every state must aim at maximizing its power. Maximizing its power. The failure of the state in this enterprise will throw it into great turmoil. Consequently, he confined his attention to means best suited to the acquisition, retention, and expansion of power. In his doctrine of the raison d'etre, ETAT, reason of the state, the state must preserve itself before it promotes the welfare of its people. For Machiavelli, the state is the highest form of human association. State is to be worshipped like a deity, even by sacrificing the individual. The state is considered worshipped like a deity, but because the state should be in a superior position. The state should be placed in a highest position. The state has some primary objectives and responsibilities like protection of life, maintenance of law and order, and looking after well-being of its member. Hence, the state must have adequate means at its disposal. Machiavelli's state was a secular entity with no relation to church. It was morally isolated. It was morally isolated with no obligation to anything outside itself. He saw good law, religion, and a citizen army as supports structure for a strong and stable state. The idea of the state differs sharply among theorists. For Thomas Hobbes, the state of nature is characterized by the war of every man against every man, a contrast condition for competitions in which the individual has natural rights to everything regardless of the interest of other. In the state of nature, the individual are nasty, poor, nasty, poor, brutus, and short. And this situation is a rule of law of jungle. There is existence in the state of nature is Hobbes famously stated solidarity, poor, nasty, brutus, and short. The only laws that exist in the state of nature, that is the law of nature, are not covenant forced between people. That is not a covenant or contract between people, but principle based on self-preservation. That Hobbes calls the first law of nature, for instance, is that every man sought to endeavor peace, every man want peace, as far as he has hope of obtaining it, and when he cannot obtain it, that he may seek and use all helps and advantages of war. For him, this sustainable condition comes to an end when individuals agree to relinquish their natural rights to everything and to transfer their self-sovereignty to a higher civil authority, or that is the higher civil authority, that is the Leviathan. For Hobbes, the authority of the sovereign is absolute. It has absolute power and its will is law. The social contract allows individual to leave the state of nature and enter into a civil society, but the former remains a threat and returns as soon as governmental powers collapse. Because the power of Leviathan is uncontested, the powers of the Leviathan is uncontested. He is much more powerful. His power is absolute. However, its collapse is very unlikely and occurs only when it is no longer able to protect its subject. For John Locke, in comparison, the state of nature is characterized by absence of government, but not by the absence of mutual obligation. The state of nature of Locke, it is a very peaceful condition. The men are simple. Beyond self-preservation, the laws of the nature or region also treaches all kind. Who will be consult it? Who will but consult it? That being all equal and independent, no one thought to harm other his life, liberty, and possession. Here in the state of nature of Locke, the men are conscientious gentlemen. The law of reason prevails. The men are rational human beings here. Unlike Hobbes, Locke believes that individuals are naturally endowed with these rights, with the right to life, liberty, and property. And that state of nature could be relatively peaceful. Individuals nevertheless agree to form commonwealth, and thereby to leave the state of nature in order to institute an impartial power capable of arbitrating their disputes and redressing injuries. Locke believes that the rights to life, liberty, and property are natural rights that precede the establishment of civil society. The idea of the state of nature was also central to the political philosophy of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. His state of nature, the state of nature is began from the state of nature of John Locke and it comes towards Thomas Hobbes. First, in the state of nature of the Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the state of nature was the peoples are living in a peaceful condition, the peoples were simple, then peoples were the conscientious gentlemen. But gradually when the property rights or property things develop on the minds of the people, they become violent. Rousseau criticized Hobbes' conception of the state of nature characterized by social antagonism. The state of nature, Rousseau argued, could only mean a primitive state preceding socialization. It is thus devoid of social traits such as pride, envy, or even fear of others. The state of nature for Rousseau is a morally neutral and peaceful condition in which solitary individuals act according to their basic urges as well as their natural desires for self-preservation. The latter instinct, however, is tempered by an equally natural sense of compassion. In Rousseau's account, laid out in his discourse on the origin of inequality, individuals leave the state of nature by becoming increasingly civilized. That is to say, independent on one another. For Hegel, state is march of God on earth. State is march of God on earth. This implies that it is a divine manifestation on earth. The state as the third movement of ethical life provided a synthesis between principles governing the family and those governing civil society. In particular, he saw in the national state in his own way a reconciliation of the concept of state as a moral community that prevailed in the ancient world with more contemporary concept of state that supported freedom and individualism. The idea of state is itself divided into three movements. First, the immediate actuality of the state as a self-dependent organisms or constitutional law. The next, the relation of state to other state in international law. The next, the universal idea is mind or spirit, which gives itself actually in the process of world history. The state was absolutely rational and had substantive will for realizing itself through history and was therefore eternal. Hegel perceives that the state as an end in itself. It is an end in itself. It was mind realizing itself through history. Then next, Marxist understanding. Marxist understanding of state. Marxist theory of state is one of the most prominent theories in political science. Marxist view challenge the basic concept of liberal state, which needs to be abolished or smashed, without which the emancipation of common people will never be possible. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels in the Communist Manifesto defined state as a political power properly, so called it merely be organized power of one class for oppressing another. Adding the executive of the modern state is but a committee for managing the common affairs of the whole bourgeoisie class. For them, the state was not eternal. It would eventually disappear. Marx regarded state, irrespective of types of the government, as evil. It is an evil institution according to Marx. The state is an evil institution according to Karl Marx. He belonged to the realm of superstructure and was conditioned and determined by its economics base. In the course of history, each mode of the production would give rise to its own political organization, which would further the interest of the economically dominant class. The alternative that Marx envisaged was a classless, stateless society of true democracy and full communism in which the political state disappeared, in which there is no political state. It is a classless society, it is a stateless society, it is a socialist society, or it is a communist society. However, neo-Marxists do not agree fully with the view that state is an instrument of a particular class. They have argued that this view was particularly true of Russian Bolshevik society but cannot generally be regarded accurate for the present time. They have also argued that the state, instead of withering away as predicted by Marx, would become even stronger in the name of the dictatorship of the proletariat class. Now the concept of civil society. Now we will study the concept of civil society. Page number 116, 116. Civil society. The idea of civil society is deeply entrenched in the political thought. The idea of the civil society is quite old. but it has become important in the last few decades. Because of the political evolution worldwide, particularly after the fall of former communist countries in Eastern Europe. The term civil society can be traced through the works of the Cicero, societal civils, and other Romans to the ancient Greek philosopher, although in classical usages, civil society was equated with state. The modern idea of civil society emerged in Scottish and continental enlightenment of the 18th century. A, a host of the political theories from John Locke, Thomas Paine to Hegel developed the notion of civil society as a domain parallel to but separate from the state, a place where citizens voluntarily associate according to their own interest and wishes. Civil society is a voluntary association where the person have to unite to fulfill their own interest. It don't have any coercive force. This new thinking reflected changing economic realities, the rise of private property, market competition, and the bourgeoisie. It also grew out of the mounting popular demands for liberty, as manifested in the American and the France revolutions. The term liberty, it works for the word liberty or things liberty. The idea of civil society took a backseat in the mid-19th century as political theorists turned their attention to the social and political consequences of the Industrial Revolution. It came back in use after World War II through the writings of the Marxist theorist Antony Gramsci, who revised the term to portray civil society as a special nucleus of independent political activity, a crucial sphere of struggle against tyranny. Then, the concept of civil society flourished along with the idea of the concept of civil society flourished along with the idea of individuals with respect to his rights, his relations with other individuals and the state. Civil society finds resonate with the theories of Thomas Hobbes and John Locke. For Hobbes, the state plays the most important role as it guarantees peace and self-preservation. Civil society may flourish only when state is strong. According to Hobbes, it was a noble argument that government by institution arises through contract between individual, excluding the sovereign, for he is not a party to the original contract. In his view, society and the state require justification since they are not natural. On the other hand, John Locke, the most important aspect of social life was freedom of individual, who first create civil society and then state which protects individual rights. The second treatise of the government, John Locke expounds protection of property interest as a reason why members of civil society unite to form government. For him, legitimate governments are those that have the consent of people. Legitimate governments are that government in which the consent of the people are there. Locke states very clearly that civil society and the state are different. He argued that state is a fiduciary power which depends on the trust of civil society. He argued if state started acting tyrannically or irresponsibly and tried to curtail the rights of individuals, then civil society must act to check the transgression. Then Adam Smith in his writing, The Wealth of Nations, explained the foundation of the conception of civil society as one of economics man, actively pursuing the necessities convenience, and amusement of the human life. Adam Smith opines that civil society is mediated by a social order constituted by private property, contracts, and free exchanges of labor, and it is the duty of the state to protect their particular order. And Hegel has further explained the relationship between state and civil society. For him, the creation of civil society is the achievement of modern world, which has for the first time given all determination of the idea they are due. Civil society for Hegel reflected a system of the needs where an individual pursued his own interest according to his inclination and abilities. For him, civil society contained three different but interrelated things. According to Hegel, first, the system of need; second, the administration of justice, that is security of person and property; then third, need for police and cooperation. And individual pursuits are linked through a way of mutual dependence that is governed by a system of formal rules described by Hegel as external state or state based on need and abstract reasoning. For Hegel, what defines civil society as civil, as opposed to a political society, is its division into various classes and states that have their own distinctive outlooks, interest, and way of life. Unlike Hegel, Karl Marx was a very critical to the concept of civil society. He viewed the state as a political consolidation of the bourgeois dominations that existed in civil society. According to Karl Marx, civil society was created by the bourgeois society. Therefore, it was nothing but the presentation of the interest of the rich section or the bourgeois sections. He added that civil society was the base where productive forces and social relations were taking place, whereas the political society was the superstructure. In this context, the state as superstructure represents the dominant class. The state is the superstructure which represents the dominant class, the rich class. On the other hand, Antonio Gramsci portrayed civil society as the center of independent political activity and an important sphere of struggle against tyranny. The Gramsci concept of civil society is premised on the idea that it is a site of struggle for legitimate use of power. He argued civil society is neither a state of nature nor is a consequence of the industrial society, but is a function of hegemony, which can be both political and cultural. He divided the superstructure of the society into two: the civil society and the political society. He argued the dominant group in society exercise hegemony through these two elements of the superstructure by both coercive as well as ideological means. Gramsci explained that civil society embodies the material as well as ideological and cultural relations in society. Gramsci explained that civil society embodies the material as well as ideological and cultural relations in society. Then we will study relationship between state and civil society. Relationship between state and civil society. Civil society and the state, although distinct and are never wholly autonomous in their relations with each other, but they are different in their objects they pursue. The limited state cannot be deprived of a necessary power to maintain the condition of a well-ordered society, such as the rule of law, the security and justice. On the other hand, a strong civil society can flourish only within a strong state in the sense of its legitimacy and the effectiveness of its political institution, rules and order. A weak and contested state can be a major impediment for the development of an active citizenry. The state and civil society, as argued by David HELD, health, must become the condition for each other. The state is usually described as society politically organized. The state is society politically organized. Society is an association of the human beings which fulfills all their needs. The state fulfills their particular needs of political organization, subject them to binding laws and decision to provide security. When a society is capable of performing these functions under the direction of a supreme decision-making authority, only then does it qualify being a state. While it is true that one is the extension of other, still there need to be certain distinction made. The state is identified by its unified formal structure, comprising different organs of the power, particularly legislature, executive, and judiciary. On the other hand, civil society is comprised of loose organizations of citizens voluntarily pursuing public interest. The state is armed with supreme legal authority, that is sovereignty. However, civil society enjoys no formal legal authority. The civil society have no legal formal authority. Okay. The state is empowered to exercise compulsory jurisdiction over its citizens and territories. Civil society does not have jurisdiction anywhere. It largely depends on its ability to motivate and inspire. The state is responsible for the maintenance of law and order, protection of its citizens from internal and external forces. The civil society voluntarily undertakes protection of the common interest of its citizens. It don't have any coercive forces. Most importantly, the existence of the state is almost universal. Some form of political organization is found in every modern society. However, civil society comes into existence only in relatively advanced society, where citizens have become adequately conscious of their rights, duties, and common interests. Despite several distinctions, it cannot be refused that an active, diverse civil society often does play a valuable role in helping advance democracy. It can discipline the state, ensure that citizen interests are taken seriously, and foster greater civics and political participation. The rise of civil society induces some to see a nearly stateless future in which tentative, minimalist state hang back, while powerful non-governmental groups impose a new civics order. The relation is depicted as a zero-sum game. Stronger state to weaker civil society and vice versa. If there is a stronger state, there is weak civil society. If there is a weak state, there is strong civil society. Civil society groups can be much more effective in shaping state policy. If the state has coherent powers for setting and enforcing policy. Good non-governmental organizations advocacy work will actually tend to strengthen, not weaken the state capacity. The relation between the state and civil society is reciprocal at best. It has to be of integrative nature, is furthering the causes of the other. It is the responsibility of the state to provide a platform and framework within which the civil society would function. The state and civil society need to go hand in hand. The progress of civil society depends upon the progress of the state, and the working of the state is in turn influenced by societal customs and the tradition. The state has to respond to the ever-growing demands of civil society. On the other hand, civil society has to be open and diversified. The concept of state and civil society have developed simultaneously. The state cannot be imagined without civil society, and in the similar way, no civil society can find legitimacy without a state. So, both are related with each other. Then we will study block 4, unit number 11, democracy versus economic growth. Democracy versus economic growth. Democracy and economic growth. Its meaning, what is the concept of democracy? The concept of democracy is more than 2500 years old, having first appeared in the Athens in the 5th century BC. Likewise, the word democracy is of Greek origin, derived from the word demokratia. It is a combination of two Greek words, demos meaning the people and kratos meaning power. Hence, democracy stands for rule by the people, which gives true legitimacy to the government. It is one of the most debated issues in the field of political science, and it is a contested concept. This means, although there is a general agreement on the meaning of democracy, yet there are differences on how to implement it, how to implement democracy. That is why there are different types of the democracy. We have direct democracy, representative democracy or indirect democracy, deliberative democracy, procedural democracy, etc. There is a consensus on the idea that democracy means popular rule and sovereignty. But how that will be achieved varies. There are, however, short inherent contradictions in the way democracy is practiced. How to achieve people's participation? Balance between liberty and equality, protection of the minority rights, and to avoid tyranny of majority, etc. are some of the questions which democracy have to grapple with. There are a number of the advantages that a democracy has over other forms of the government. It prevents rules of the oppressor. It prevents rules of the oppressor, and it fosters human development, facilitate protection of the individual rights and freedom, and could even prevent war at the international level, as democracy normally do not fight against each other. In his 1861 book, Consideration of the Representative Government, J.S. Mill has given three advantages of democratic decision making over non-democratic ones. First, strategically, democracy compels decision makers to take into account interests, opinions, and rights of most of the people, which would not be the case in the authoritarian or aristocratic form of government. Secondly, democracy brings in a number of varied views in process, which allows decision makers to pick up the best ideas. Thirdly, democracy also helps in character building of citizens, as it inculcates qualities like rationality, autonomy, and independent thinking. This creates pressure on public opinion on political leaders who cannot ignore people's views in order to remain in power. The idea of democracy has come a long way from its initial form in Greece, which was not exclusive in nature. The Greek model of democracy is excluded women, slaves, immigrants, making it undemocratic in spirit. The spirit continued even in the modern democracy like France, Britain, and US, where some sections were not allowed to vote, while the voting rights are given to the wealthy person or wealthy man. The French Revolution of 1789 talked about liberty, equality, and fraternity, apart from popular sovereignty of mankind. However, women did not get the right to vote, and was only in the year 1944 that France started universal adult suffrage. But in Britain, women got the right to vote in the year 1928 only, while in US they got this right in 1920. However, discrimination on the basis of the color remained in US, and it was only in 1965 that African American women and males were given the right to vote. The India has been progressive in this regard compared to the Western democracy, as it adopted universal adult franchise from 1950s, when its constitution came into force and became the world's first democratic state to have universal adult franchise since its inception. Saudi Arabia is the latest country which has allowed women to vote in the year 2015 only. Women for the first time exercised their right to vote in municipal elections there in Saudi Arabia. Democracy could be well understood by two different views, procedural minimalist and substantive maximalist. The procedural dimensions merely focus on procedure or means in place to attain democracy. The procedural dimension, it only focuses on the procedure or means in place to attain democracy. The only it focuses on the procedures and means. It argues that regular competitive elections on the basis of universal adult franchise and rural political participation would produce a democratically elected government. But substantive democracy tries to overcome the shortcomings of the procedural view, arguing that social and economic differences would hamper people's participation. Social and economic differences could hamper people's participation in the democratic process. So there should not be social and economic differences in society. It focuses on outcome like social equality instead of ends in order to truly work for the governed. In a sense, is talk about common good rather than benefit of limited individual. The right of marginalized section like women and poor are protected through redistributive justice so that condition can be created through state intervention for their participation in the political process. So the term democracy is generally used to denote liberal democracy, which implies a representative government in which the ability of the elected representatives to exercise decision-making power is subject to the rule of law and usually moderated by a constitution that emphasizes the protection of the rights and freedoms of individuals. Its democratic features are based upon system of the regular and competitive elections conducted on the basis of the universal adult franchise and political equity or equality. The core features of the liberal democracy are as follows. Constitutional government based upon formal, usually legal rules. Second, it guarantees of the civil liberties and individual rights by the Constitution. Then, institutional fragmentation and a system of check and balances. Next, regular election respecting the principles of the universal adult suffrage and one person, one vote. The next, political pluralism in form of the electoral choice and a party competition. The next, a healthy civil society in which organized groups and interest enjoys independence from government. The next, capitalist or private enterprise economy organized along market lines. Importantly, the last point, a capitalist or private enterprise economy organized along market line. This point is relevant in the context of economic growth because in capitalism, economic system and ideology are based upon private ownership of the means of the production and their operation, and they operate only for profit. In a capitalist market economy, decision making and investment are determined by the owners of the means of the production in financial and capital market, whereas prices of the distribution of the goods and services are mainly determined by competition in goods and services market. The economic freedom in liberal democracy promotes economic growth or the per capita income. Then we will study economic growth, page number 125, economic growth. Economic growth is the process by which a nation's wealth increases over time. In hardcore economics terms, it is increasing the market value of goods and services produced in an economy over a period of time. Long-term economic growth increases national income and employment rates in a country, which improves standard of living. Here, a distinction should be made between economic growth and economic development. Economic development brings people out of low standard of living and provides them with employment and shelter. It also takes into account the issue of sustainability. meeting the needs of the present without compromising sustainability, meeting the needs of the present generation without compromising the needs of the future generations. Then economics growth, what is growth? Economics growth, it may causes issue of pollution and congestion without addressing the issues of sustainability. They, they pollute, they use without considering the future generations. Some factors that affect economic growth are as explained below. Now we will explain the causes that affect economic growth. First is natural resources. That is natural resources. The amount of natural resources of a country will determine its economic growth prospect as well. For example, countries in the West Asia have reserves of the oil. The West Asian countries have reserves in the oil, and by selling this community that oil, that economic growth has accelerated for increasing. Then infrastructure, basic physical and organizational structure and facilities augment economic growth. Moving goods from one place to another in a country well connected by the roads and the railway will be cheap and easy than in a country that does not have good connectivity. Then labor, availability of the labor power. Labor is both a challenge and opportunity. Higher workforce helps in economic growth, but it needs to be skilled as well. Then next, technology. It increases productivity at lower cost. Then political stability. There will be flight of capital from a country that lacks political stability, and investor will not put their money in an economy that lacks political directions. So democracy and economic growth and development. Democracy, economic growth and development have had a strong corrective and interactive relationship throughout history. All the three are related: democracy, economics, and development. Economic growth and development. The relationship between political democracy and economic growth has been at the center of debate in the past 50 years. First, in the year 1950s and 60s, the debate was on the question of underdeveloped countries, that is Asia, Africa, and Latin America. After getting independence from colonial rules, these countries made it their primary objective to make their system democratic. However, soon a majority of them turned into a dictatorship. Whether it was Pakistan, Myanmar, Indonesia, Taiwan, Singapore, Nigeria, and Cuba, etc. The exigency of the growth and survival compelled them to quell all political oppression and denial of the civil and the political liberties to their citizens. This raised the fundamental question: what comes first, democracy or growth? In other words, what should be given preferences, giving political liberty, rights, democratic freedom, and get the consent of citizens for government policies, or removing poverty, illiteracy, and misery of the people through an authoritarian regime? There are two views on this question. One says that democracy and economic growth are not compatible, while the other says they are compatible. The democracy and economic growth are not compatible. How it is not compatible? Now we will discuss. Page number 126. There are some experts who believe that democracy may not be good for economic growth. Democracy may not be good for economic growth. Robert Barro's seminal research in this area concluded that more political rights do not have an effect on growth. The first lens is that democracy is not the key to economic growth. According to George Poisoner's dictatorship will often be the optimal for every poor countries. Such countries tend not only to have simple economics but also lack the cultural and institutional preconditions for democracy. However, at the higher level of the economic development, democracy would do a better job than non-democracy in encouraging economic development. As Baru concluded that the middle level of democracy is most favorable to growth. The lowest level comes second, and the highest level comes third. Adam Krzyzewski and Limongi, after analyzing countries from 1950s to 1991, have concluded a democratic country that has a per capita income under $1,500, the region has a life of 8 years. With $1,500 to $3,000, it is 18 years, and above $6,000, it is stable. About two-thirds of the democratic countries which had the per capita income of $9,000 have been more stable. S.M. Lipset has also echoed similar view, as he too believes that better a nation, more chances are there for it to maintain democracy. Both democracy and non-democracy can be beneficial or harmful effect on economic development. Three kinds of stability, that is ownership stability, stable system of the, that is ownership stability means stable system of the property right. Legal stability, that is rule of law should be maintained. Social stability, lack of social unrest or disturbances are among the most necessary conditions for economic development. Throughout sufficient condition. These conditions may be present either in a democracy or a non-democracy and could aid economic development. In turn, even economic development can have an impact on democracy or an authoritarian state. Economic hardship can bring down any government. Poverty can bring down the democratic government, as per A. Prigozhin, etc. Even authoritarian regimes are also at risk, as seen during the Arab Spring that swept many Arab countries in the year 2011. One argument made in the context of the East Asian nation has developed prevailing economic growth ahead of democracy. The central premise of this reasoning stems from the observation that development requires change and that change affects some voters adversely. So governments dependent on electoral supports in the next election will typically tend to avoid choices that impose hardship on significant number of voters. For example, in Singapore, post-reform China and Taiwan have been able to achieve higher development levels than some democracies like India. It is called Lee hypothesis, and it was developed by former Prime Minister of the Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew. For Lee Kuan Yew, the ultimate test of a political system is whether it improves the standard of living for the majority of the people. This school believes that political and civil rights come later, while economic rights come first. If people are given a choice between political freedom and fulfilling economic needs, people will invariably choose growth to rid themselves of economic misery and deprivation. They would not be care for democracy. Now we will study democracy and economic growth are compatible. Page number 128. Generally, it is believed that, unlike the authoritarian regime, democracy creates better opportunities for economic growth and cultural progress. Progressive development requires policy choices that lead to a development that produce a wide distribution of the benefits of growth. Democratic regimes are more effective at producing wide distribution of benefits because of the strong tendency of the authoritarian regimes to structure economic activities towards re-seeking activities and enrichment of the ruling circle and widespread corruption. But democratic governments are also less prone to the corruption and rent seeking. They are less predatory. There is, however, no consciousness on the correlations between democracy and economic growth. Scholars like Milton Friedman believe that a higher degree of the rights are conducive to the economic development. A higher degree of the rights are conducive or necessary for to economic development. Other studies suggest that democracy promotes economic liberalization and in the long term democracy led to sustainable growth. According to estimates of the World Economic Forum, a country that switches for non-democracy to democracy achieve about 20% higher GDP per capita in the long run. These are large but not impossible effects and suggest that the global risks in democracy over the past 50 years has yielded of 6% higher world GDP. There are positive effects of the democracy on the economic reforms, private investment, the size and capacity of government, and the reduction in the social conflict. These are the channels by which democracy can increase economic growth. Nobel laureate Amartya Sen. Amartya Sen has argued that democracy is a precondition for economic growth. He believes that the Lee hypothesis is based on periodic empiricism, drawing on very selective and limited information rather than on any general statistical testing over the wide-ranging data and are available. A general relation of this kind cannot be established on the basis of very selective evidence. Okay. Then, in his book, Development as Freedom, Amartya Sen has argued that real development cannot be reduced to simply increasing basic incomes or to rising average per capita income. Rather, it requires a package of overlapping mechanisms and progressively enables the exercise of a growing range of freedom. Authoritarian systems do not give freedom to its citizens and hence have a limited view of the broad concept of development and economic growth. The real meaning of the economic growth can be achieved in a democratic setup as its space of political and civil freedom which help in formation of values and needs of the people. It also gives rise to multiple institutions like legal mechanisms, market structures, education, health, accountability, etc., which help in safeguarding human freedoms and capabilities. That's all. Now question from citizenship. Now question from citizenship. Question from citizenship. Discuss about various theory of citizenship. Discuss about various theories of citizenship. Discuss about various theories of citizenship. Yes, যদি discuss about various theory of citizenship question আসিলা, then you can write all theory, liberal theory, republican theory, libertarian theory, communitarian theory, all theories. যদি individual question আসিলা, write about liberal theory of citizenship, then सेपरेट करके लिखि पारिबो ओके
Yes, ma'am.
the next question elaborate about the relevance of elaborate about elaborate about the relevance of the idea of global citizenship. Elaborate about the relevance of the idea of global citizenship. Is it okay?
Author, ma'am, repeat.
Okay. Elaborate about elaborate. ELABORATE. Elaborate about the relevance. A global citizenship idea of relevance. What is the relevance of the idea of global citizenship? The kete matra relevant ki irrelevant. Elaborate about the relevance of the idea of global citizenship.
Yes, ma'am. Hello.
Relevance of the idea of global citizenship. Is it okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Lekhila?
How, ma'am?
Then question from civil society and state. Explain different theories of state. Explain different theories of state.
Explain different.
Explain different theory of state. যদি ইন্ডিভিজুয়াল কিছু থিওরি আসলা সেটা ইন্ডিভিজুয়াল লিখব যদি সবু থিওরি উপরে লিখব क्वेश्चन আসলা দেন সবু থিওরি তুমি গোটে প্যারাগ্রাফ রে এলাবোরেট করিবো
তাহলে ম্যাম এইটা ସବୁ ଲେଖିବା ପଡିବ ଆନ୍ସର
শুণ হ্যাঁ এইটা যে क्वेश्चन কহিদেলি এক্সপ্লেন ডিফরেন্ট থিওরিজ অফ স্টেট আমি সবু থিওরিজ গুড়া যে পড়লা ক্লাসিক্যাল আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ডিং অফ স্টেট লিবরাল ইন্ডিভিজুয়ালিস্টিক আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ডিং অল দিস থিওরি মার্কসিস্ট আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ডিং দেন সবু লিখব আর যদি কিছু ইন্ডিভিজুয়াল আসিলা মার্কসিস্ট আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ডিং অর লিবরাল আন্ডারস্ট্যান্ডিং সে গোটে জিনিস লিখব বুঝিলা
ହଁ ମ୍ୟାମ୍
ক্লিয়ার তো
ହଁ ମ୍ୟାମ୍
Yes,
যদি
ma'am.
শর্ট কোশ্চেন আসিলা গোটে উপরে তুমি গোটে গোটে লিখব আর যদি কম্পাইল করে ସବୁ মিশাই করে গোটে কোশ্চেন আসিলা ସବୁ থিওরি কু লেখ বলি করে তুমি মিশাই করে লিখি পারিব
ହଁ
বুঝি পারলো
Yes,
Oh,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
okay the next question elaborate about civil society elaborate about civil society elaborate about civil society and elaborate about civil society means what is civil society you have to write here okay and discuss relationship between and discuss relationship between state and civil society relationship between state and civil society
ଆଉ ଥରେ ମ୍ୟାମ୍
okay elaborate about civil society ଦେଖିଲ
ହଁ ମ୍ୟାମ୍
Yes, ma'am.
and say gote question ra long question rakhchi say gote question and discuss about relationship between state and civil society. Relationship between state and civil society. Discuss relationship between state and civil society. देखिलो
हाँ मैम
इस जगह civil society means what is civil society you have to write first what is civil society elaborate about civil society पर जहाँ पढ़िलो से सब लिखिबो then the relations between state and civil society ଆଉ state ଭିତରେ ତାଙ୍କର relations ଟା कोन ତାଙ୍କର संपर्कटा कोन सेटा तमे लिखिबो then from the unit democracy and economics growth. Democracy and economics growth. From this unit, we will expect only two questions. First question, democracy and economics growth are not democracy and economic growth are not compatible.
कौन मैम
Democracy and economics growth are not compatible. Colon degree analyze. Okay, तार विषय तुम डिस्कस करिवो एनालाइज करिवो विस्तृत भावरे डेमोक्रेसी एंड इकोनॉमिक्स ग्रोथ आर नॉट कॉम्पिटेबल कोलन देखि एनालाइज बुझियला
Yes, ma'am.
फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन इटा द नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन हला डेमोक्रेसी एंड इकोनॉमिक्स ग्रोथ आर कॉम्पिटेबल सर नॉट कॉम्पिटेबल एटा कॉम्पिटेबल democracy and economics growth are
Comfortable.
compatible. Okay, this is also you have to analyze or elaborate. बुझेला सर डेमोक्रेसी एंड इकोनॉमिक्स ग्रोथ compatible नुहे डिस्कस करिवो नाउ डेमोक्रेसी एंड इकोनॉमिक्स ग्रोथ आर compatible माने हैंड इन हैंड एका सहित जाई पारबे सेटा यू हैव टू एलाबोरेट ओके और एनी डाउट्स or any problem
एक्सक्यूज मी मैम
in the next class we will study about liberty and censorship protective discrimination versus principle of the fairness and family law and state पढ़ी के आस्तिबो
एक्सक्यूज मी मैम मु काली क्लास अटेंड करेनी मोर नेटवर्क प्रॉब्लम थिला हेले आपण मते काली रो लॉन्ग क्वेश्चन टिके जणाई पारिबे की
from the unit democracy and gender
यस मैम
77
Ma'am, is the class complete?
today's class is complete.
Okay, yesterday question you can even search it from YouTube because all these classes are being uploaded in YouTube of IGNOU Bhubaneswar.
Excuse me, sir.
कौन कहले
Hello.
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 Yes